Hi, and welcome to the Animal Training Academy podcast show, the show for animal training and behaviour nerds, where I, Ryan Cartledge, interview the world's most proficient animal training and behaviour geeks. We're absolutely thrilled and grateful to have you here with us today. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on whatever you're listening to this on so that you don't miss a single episode. Each episode of this show is brought to you on behalf of the ATA membership. And if you like the conversations in this episode, then you're invited to continue them with like-minded behaviour nerds within the membership area, which you can find out more about at www.animaltrainingacademy.com. You'll get access to twice monthly live web classes, the back catalogue of previous web class replays, plus a huge library of videos and projects to help problem solve your training challenges. Plus, we're a sociable bunch with an exclusive private Facebook group and forum areas. It's like a Netflix social media platform for animal behaviour geeks. But we will start today's episode where we will talk to one Carrie-Anne Selwyn. Carrie is a dog trainer, podcaster, speaker, Hoopers judge, competitor, and Canine Hoopers World founder. Initially a riding instructor, Carrie also worked at a groomers and a cattery. After passing a level 3 animal care certification, Carrie pursued a career in dog training in 2012, becoming a qualified trainer with the IMDT, that's the Institute of Modern Dog Trainers. Carrie is now an ambassador for the Pet Professional Network and a guest speaker for the Distinctive Dog Trainer, IMDT, PPG Australia, and a course tutor and assessor for the IMDT. Carrie also has 2 successful podcasts, Canine Hoopers World and the Dog Training Dictionary. She's taught internationally, both in person and virtually. She set up Canine Hoopers World in 2019 and since then has taught over 500 instructors how to teach Hoopers in over 15 countries. Carrie regularly competes with her GSD Dodge, and he was ranked second in the large rescue dog league and won the Shepherd League this year. He was also runner-up in a winter series of competitions and achieved a platinum warrant. So, without further ado, it's my very great pleasure to welcome Carrie to the show today, who is patiently waiting by. Carrie, thank you so much for taking the time to come and hang out with us on the other side of the world. Come and hang out with us here at Animal Training Academy. We appreciate it.
Hello, how are you?
Doing well. It's 6:50 p.m. there, 6:50 a.m. here. I've just had breakfast. Had some
cool, and I've just had dinner, so we're good.
Our bellies are full. We're nutriented ourselves. I'm forgetting the correct I'm
hoping that neither of us have eaten too much that we're going to end up in like a little food coma where we're like getting sleepy. So hopefully we've eaten the correct foods and we have the right balance of carbs.
Yeah, and I think with my inability to find the correct word there, let's, for the podcast audience's sake, hope that I've drunk enough coffee at 6:50 in the morning. Hey, let's dive straight into the first question today, Carrie. For this one, I was hoping you could please take the listeners back and share with us where you got started, where you first learned about animal training, about positive reinforcement, and share some stories with us.
So I was thinking about this kind of on the lead up to us recording, and I was like, well, I started dog training in 2012, but actually the first I can remember, we had this gorgeous little collie dog called Shep, because in the UK, like all collies were called Shep in the 80s. And I can remember like doing a little bit of stuff with him. And I can remember like getting this clicker. And I'm not going to lie, I didn't have a clue how to use it. All I know is that I pushed the button and gave the dog a treat. And I think I just reinforced his sit really well. Then we had another collie, Mac. And I remember kind of doing a little bit more training with him. But it wasn't something that was really on my radar. And being in the horse world, especially back in kind of the 90s, there was a lot of kind of pressure training being used. I was very fortunate that my riding instructor we had at the time, the bits we had at the school were pretty much rubber snaffles, which were kind of unheard of. They were sort of quite a new thing. So in terms of bits in horses' mouths, it's kind of the softest, most gentle option you can kind of use. Either that or we would ride them in bitless bridles. She taught us to kind of ride from our seats and stuff. So although I wasn't aware of it, I actually have to say thank you to my riding instructor for kind of teaching me the kind of, I guess, the most lemur approach to horse care, because it was all about, you and the horse being working together, and we weren't permitted to be kicking them hard or yanking around with our hands. The idea was to sit very calmly and communicate through your body. So I guess kind of that's where I've come from in the kind of animal training background. Then we ended up with my partner and I, my husband and I, ended up with this little bull breed mix thing. In the UK, we have this ridiculous law where if a dog measures a certain way, they're banned, which is ridiculous. And because we didn't know what her measurements were going to be growing up, it was a case of, right, we need to make sure she's really well trained. She's listens to cues and all of that kind of stuff. So that's how I kind of got into training properly. And I mean, Munchkin's 12 now. So it's been like 12 years of actually understanding how to train properly. And then kind of over a decade now of kind of training properly and teaching. I had originally a little terrier, Tizer, who's no longer with us. And he was just the naughtiest thing ever. Like, honestly, he was so naughty. But I look back and I wish I knew then what I know now, because I think he would have been so much better behaved if I'd kind of understood more about training when I first got him. But Munch went to training from pretty much, she was about 8 weeks old, the first training class we attended. And I was very fortunate to have some very, very good positive reinforcement trainers with training her. Started training Chica, my Chihuahua, as well. And then Chica had a litter of pups. I won't go into the whole breeding debate because I know it's a heated subject, but I will say I've had a litter. I learned a lot. I will never do it again because breeding well is really, really hard work. But having minks, kind of from the start, I started training with a different trainer, and she was setting up her own business. And she basically invited me to be a dog trainer at her training school. And I didn't have any formal kind of training education, just what I'd learned from going to classes with my own dogs. So that's where my journey with the IMDT, the Institute of Modern Dog Trainers, started. And the more I learned, the more I realized that the school I was working for wasn't really for me. There were a few disagreements about methods that were being used. And I basically lost my job because I wouldn't put a choke chain on a puppy. So I kind of knew where my ethics stuck quite early on. And I don't know whether that was because of my horse background or just because I don't want to be mean to the learner, like dog or person. So that's kind of where the journey sort of began for me with the dogs. And before becoming a dog trainer, I worked at a cattery. I was an assistant manager there. And it was a really, really good cattery. We had a really high standard of care. All the cats were awesome, and I got to meet like so many different personalities of feline. It was really cool. And then I've worked on yards pretty much with horses from the age of 11 right up until I was 29. I was kind of in the horse world. And then when I'm giving away my age now, but when I was leaving my 20s, I then took the big jump to being a dog trainer. I kind of left equine and went to canine because I'm not going to lie, I got fed up of being trampled and dealing with rude livery horses. And any of the listeners that have kind of experienced livery yards, we had livery yard and we also had thoroughbred youngsters. So we had breed mares, foals and general liveries that ranged from people that just hacked to pony club kids to competitive riders. So the yard was busy and it was quite stressful. And I won't lie, it's put me off ponies. Last
night 2 nights ago, I saw there was some old vegetables in the fridge. So I was like, wifey, I'm going to make a soup. And I grabbed all of the stuff. And I don't know my way around a kitchen. But I put all this stuff in. I found some stuff in the pantry. I put it in and I was cooking it while getting Summer ready for bed. And I was really excited. And I was like, this soup's going to be amazing. It's going to be so amazing. It looks so delicious. And then I put the blender thing in and oh my God, it was the worst thing I've ever tasted. and wifey thought it was hilarious. And she's like, oh my God, you should have asked me. And I'm like, you know what? I'm glad that I now know what not to do. Like I am a better, I'm on my path to being the amazing soup maker that I was born to be because of this soup. And I know that I've got animals in the past that I wish that I knew then what I know now. Like you said that you did with, sorry, I forgot the name. Tizer. But at the same time, I'm super grateful for those animals and the lessons that they taught me, because I wouldn't be, you can read about all of this stuff in a textbook. You can be like, oh, this is how relationships work. This is how positive reinforcement works. But it's so different. I could read about this is how you make a soup, but it's so different than making a really, really bad soup. Like, we're going to be talking about that for the rest of our lives. It was the worst soup in the world. So I'm curious, like I totally resonate with that. And it's something I think about a lot. But what are some lessons that you learned from that time? What did Pfizer? It wouldn't be called Pfizer. That's Tizer. Pfizer's like way too.
Yeah, no, definitely wasn't a vaccination.
That would be weird. What did Tizer teach you that you now bring into your?
The terriers are hard work. I think with him, he was one of my what I refer to as second-hand dogs. I acquired him in a relationship breakup. We broke up and I got the dog, huzzah, which was perfect. But I think he was my first dog that was my dog, not just the family dog. The collies I grew up with, the poodles, they were the family dogs that kind of belonged to everyone, and my dad trained and all that stuff. Whereas with him, he was my first dog. And I think he had a big attitude. In ways, he was so easy, but in other ways, he was so challenging. And one thing I can always remember is whenever you were trying to do like what I call like actual training, formal training, like get a clicker out, get your treat bag out and let's do stuff, he would just shout at you. And it used to frustrate me so much because I'd be like, can you just be quiet and like think for a minute? And he'd be like, no, I have to do everything whilst I'm shouting. And my brain just couldn't cope with me learning how to train and him shouting at me. Munchkin, our little mixed breed, bull breed girl, is the polar opposite of that. And she's one of those dogs that's like, what do you want me to do? Show me how to do it. Okay, I'm going to work this out. And she would just as easily kind of like lure something, and then you could kind of get that lure gone straight away, and she would be like, okay, I've got this, now let's do the reps. Whereas Tizer, he'd be like, where's the lure? If the lure's not there, I'm not doing it. And he really taught me like how to fade a lure correctly. So did one of my chihuahuas actually, and she is still a madam. If you start trying to do training with food in your hand and then fade the lure, she's like, you have to start the session with no lure with her and just following hand touches or targets or whatever. Because I just think like some dogs are kind of like, oh, okay, that thing's gone, but I know what I'm doing. And Tizer was like, if you are not showing me every single step, then I'm not going to do it. And he taught me, ironically, how to be quite calm when I'm training, but also how for me not to get frustrated. And I guess how to kind of reduce criteria so that he could learn. But it was interesting. I remember we were doing, it was a training course at IMDT, and one of the girls that was on the course, her dog wasn't suitable to be worked indoors around other dogs. So I was like, oh, borrow Tizer, he might be a pain, but let's try. And do you know what? He was silent the whole time we worked with her. And I was like, dude, why can't you do that with me? But I think it was just our relationship. I don't know if he was on best behavior for my friend or he was just trying to prove that he could do it. But yeah, I always remember finding that hilarious, that if anyone else trained him, he was silent. And if I trained him, he would just shout a lot.
Hey, Phoebe's the same. She's very different around me. If our household is gathered, we have the cat collective, Tilo and Bagheera and Phoebe, and then we have this little tyrant called Summer, who's consistently getting more agile. Phoebe uses her voice, and then when I'm not there, someone's like, she's perfect. she's an angel. So I totally get that now. That feeling of frustration, I imagine at the time that would have felt overwhelming, and maybe even a little bit directionless in terms of where do you go from here. And that's a set of feelings that I think a lot of our listeners of the show can relate to when they hit rough patches in their training, or they come up against challenges at all stages of that journey. But you've gone from there to, now, as we said in your bio, teaching over 500 instructors worldwide with your current business. How did you take that frustration? What happened between then and now? Because that's quite a big difference.
I mean, first of all, it was a decade. That is a literal decade of where I was, where we started, where my training journey started, what dogs I had, and now, I mean, the girls. So I'd always kind of wanted to do a dog sport. I was really into trick training, loved doing trick stuff, and kind of was looking at different sports. And I was really fortunate that the training school I was going to, we had a chance to do some kind of working trials type stuff, some obedience type stuff, agility, scent work, a little bit of tracking. And then when I started my journey with IMDT, there were like all these courses we could go on, and we could trial these different things. And actually, probably one of the most versatile dog I have out of my lot really is Chica. Chica's my eldest Chihuahua. She's a little long coat Chihuahua. And I always joke she's my teacup German Shepherd, because she has literally done everything. She's tried everything. She's tried fly ball. She's tried rally. We've done some obedience. She's got trick titles. She's done agility. And I mean, watching a Chihuahua do an A-frame is just the cutest thing ever, because it's like the little train that could, trying to get up to the peak and then down the other side. I actually remember my instructor going, she won't get over that. And I was like, yes, she will. Chica's like the problem solver in the family. So she's got herself into mischief a few times, climbing onto surfaces and consuming things she shouldn't, notably twice dark chocolate, where we've ended up with a bit of a nightmare vet visit. Luckily, she was fine. But I tried all these different sports, and with her, as much as she was kind of having fun doing them, we were always at the disadvantage with her size. And I kind of wasn't in a place, I think, in my training journey where I was kind of ready to do a sport properly, and by properly, I mean, like, now Hoopers is everything to me, and I literally wake up in the morning and dream about Hoopers at night, and everything in between is just Hooper related, which I'm sorry to my husband, it's how our life has turned into. But with Munchkin, going back a little step, so Munchkin, her arousal levels get high very, very quickly. So obedience isn't really my bag. I love watching it, and I kind of liken it to dressage, where, I did dressage tests, but if I could go jumping, it was much more fun. So obedience has kind of never really been the thing that I've been focused on. And I tried agility with her, and she was really cool over about 3 or 4 obstacles. And then she would just redirect onto my arm and use me as a tug toy, which is not the most helpful of things to do, but also, it hurts. Having a ball breed attached to your arm is not the best thing. So I did do some kind of, I don't want to call it man work, because it wasn't formal. It was more like bitey, tuggy stuff. She never actually got onto a sleeve properly. We were just using like bite cushions, stuff like that. And it was a really cool outlet for her of that ball breedness of having to bite and grab something. We were tapping into that little part of her predatory motor pattern that was a good outlet. But in terms of kind of a sport with her, she loves tracking. Again, we did a little bit of rally with her. But as soon as you started to get into the faster stuff, it was just too much. Her arousal levels were too high, and then you'd have to stop and bring her back down. And that, to me, kind of reduces the fun for the animal and for me. I don't want to be stopping every 2 seconds because I've got a dog attached to my arm. And also, I didn't want to feed into that stereotype stereotype of bull breeds are dangerous, bull breeds are aggressive, bull breeds are blah, 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 whatever ever myth you've heard of about bull breeds that is ridiculous. So then I kind of was left with Minx, my youngest Chihuahua. She's the most aptly named Chihuahua in the world. So for any Pokemon geeks out there, her nickname is the Flareon because she literally looks like a little Pokemon Flareon. She's like this little fire creature who is just sass. She's just sass. And she was the one that I kind of started my dog trainer journey with, because she was the one that when I was starting to teach puppy classes, my mum was bringing her to puppy class with me. And I learned so much from her because we were trying all these different sports and she'd sort of do it, but she was never quite comfortable, never quite confident doing it. Unfortunately, we had an incident when she was about 18 months old where she got chased by a larger off-lead dog, and it went from play to, I would say, predatory drift very, very quickly, and the dog wasn't playing anymore. And it was one of those situations where it was like someone needs to grab one of those dogs because otherwise this could end up really badly. And since then, she has had very big emotions in terms of other dogs being around her. So I sort of was very mindful of where we were going, training, what we were doing, and some of the tricks she knows, like especially the cognitive stuff. She can match shapes. So if I show her a picture of a snowman, she can go and find the other picture of a snowman. If I tell her to show me big, she will show me the big picture. If I ask her to show me small, she'll show me the small picture. So we've done some really cool cognitive stuff with her. And then I guess it must be 5 years ago, I'd heard about this sport called Hoopers, and it actually originated over in the States. Big thank you to Sharon Nelson for creating this weird little obstacle called a hoop that's about an inch wide and is ridiculously small. And she brought that into NADAC agility, and there was a big kind of, what is this ridiculous, stupid obstacle? It's tiny. And from that, kind of Hoopers was born, and it's kind of started off as an agility-based sport, and now it's becoming a sport in its own entity. So one of my friends was hosting another instructor who's actually a very good friend of mine now, and there was a Hoopers workshop, and I took Munch to start with. So Munchkin went along and was doing really well. She went through the hoops, she went around the barrels, and then she realized there was a tunnel and the arousal level went too high. And then she got overexcited, and I was like, and we're back into stress mode. Cool. So the next time I was like, I'm just going to bring Minx. I'm going to see what she does. And oh my God, she loved it. And I watched this little orange dog go from being really unsure, really nervous, really just not confident around other dogs, to being in a group class environment and actually choosing to go near some of the other dogs in class and kind of make friends. So for me, the start of Hoopers was kind of a confidence thing with her. And then I discovered that actually it was fun and we liked it. And I kind of got bitten by the bug, and I did a lot of instructor courses. In fact, all the instructor courses that were available at the time. And then I was very fortunate to be invited out to Australia to teach Hoopers. And that's kind of where Canine Hoopers World was born. And it's why it ended up being called Canine Hoopers World, because the first instructor course was actually in the UK, and that was kind of my tester course. I wrote the course content. A friend of mine hosted me, and we did the first instructor course in the UK, but the second one was actually in Perth, Western Australia. So straight away, within kind of a month of it being a thing, it was already international, which was absolutely crazy for me. And then from there, it's just kind of grown. But with Minx, I kept competing, like we kept doing little shows. It became really kind of obvious to me that training at home, she loved. She didn't like the competition environment. She just wasn't feeling confident with it. I started to be very mindful of where we were going, what organizations we were competing with. And I kind of made the decision to retire her from competition, start doing less. And then we were on holiday in 2019. I just made the leap from being a dog trainer that was also teaching Hoopers to I'm only teaching Hoopers. I'd literally just made the leap, done my last class before we went on holiday. And I came home and got a phone call from a very good trainer friend of mine to say, I found you a dog. And I was like, I'm not looking for a dog And Tizer was still with us at the time. I knew he was not great. He was only with us for another 3 months after that. And I was like, dude, really aren't looking for a dog. And he was like, no, we've got this job. We don't know if he's German Shepherd or German Shepherd Mallee Cross, but lovely family have got him. They're overdogged. It's their first pet dog. He's going to be too much for them. You need to come and meet him. So I travelled to a little part of the UK called the New Forest. I don't know if you visited on your trip, but the New Forest is a magical place where ponies roam free and cows and donkeys, and you literally drive down the road and you have to stop to let the ponies cross. I love it. It's amazing. So got there and there was the lady pulled up in the car. She had this little puppy on her lap and I walked over and the first thing she said was, oh my God, he didn't bark at you. And I was like, okay, cool. What do you mean didn't bark at me? Like, he's giving me little kisses, got him out, said hi, sorted out all the details of the transfer of ownership. And off she went and took him into my friend's garden and kind of met him properly, then took him home. And then my husband got home and then I realized what she meant, because every time someone new was anywhere near him, he would just bark at them. And this was at 17 weeks old. So it's like, oh, okay, this is going to be a challenge. We have a working line shepherd in the world now and it likes its voice and it's going to use it. So I kind of knew that Dodge was going to do hoopers, and it was always my plan that he was going to do hoopers. And I think he first saw a hoop when he was probably 19 weeks old. I think had him for a couple of weeks, let him settle in, realised that I was the good lady and would feed him lots of chicken. And then, kind of his training started then. And as you said in the bio, he's now the highest ranked shepherd in the country. And he's kind of a really cool sports dog. And he still has big emotions about things because it's a shepherd. But yeah, that's kind of where my journey's kind of been headed. And the last kind of few years of having him has just changed everything. It's changed in ways the way I train, but also what my focus is. And I kind of feel like I've now gone, and this is not a derogatory phrasing at all, and please nobody think it is, but I've gone from being a pet dog trainer to a sport dog trainer. And it does feel so different. And I feel like in ways my job is now easier because I kind of have a limited criteria that I'm teaching now. I have specific pieces of equipment that the dogs are going to be using. And whereas before, when I was doing kind of, adolescent classes, life skill classes, puppy classes, there was so much to be taught and all these different ways to do it. And now it's like there's 5 pieces of equipment that the dogs need to learn. And then you just start raising the criteria and building distance and duration and working on forward focus and all that stuff. So I think in ways, my job's now easier. But in ways, it's way more consuming than kind of pet dog stuff ever was. And that's kind of where I am now in my journey, is eat, breathe, sleep hoopers.
Firstly, Phoebe would like to add that she thinks she is the most aptly named Chihuahua. And the reason is because the name doesn't mean anything. It reminds me of, she doesn't have a reason, but she just wanted to add that. Secondly, awesome Dodge at what he's achieved. And I'm curious about was it Minx that was biting?
Yes.
And you...
Oh, Munchkin. No, yeah,
sorry,
Munchkin. Another well-named dog.
Forgive my processing of names and linking two parts of the story. So I'm grateful for you.
It's fine.
Your graciousness there. You explored that other outlet for Munchkin. How did that influence the behaviour in other contexts once?
So with Munch, I actually found doing things like scent work, tracking. Tracking is her bag. I love tracking her. We don't do so much now. She's getting older. She much prefers life as a sofa ornament than a working dog now, and is basically retired and kind of potters around the garden, has a lovely time, kind of sniffs around stuff, and that's what she does now. But I'm pretty sure if I got her harness and line out and set a track for her, she would be on it. One of the things I think for me with the scent work and the tracking is that when we're using the dog's olfactory system, it can be quite calming and soothing for them. But one of the things I always found funny with her is when you set a track up, she would do, and I'm sure I hope people understand, the Staffy squeal, which is like this little noise that only Staffords seem to be able to produce. And it's the only time she does that little chattery, squeaky squeal is when she's on the start pole to go and do tracking. And that's kind of where I went with her. So I think in a way it's been a really good base for me getting Dodge, because I have the ability to do these really kind of high adrenaline sports with him, but I also have the tool belt to do the kind of lower adrenaline, more mindful kind of stuff. And we did a lot of scent work with him as a puppy. I looked at doing a little bit of tracking when he was younger, but to be honest, our loose lead walking wasn't great. And encouraging him to pull in any manner just wasn't the way. So we concentrated on scent work and loose lead walking, and now we're doing tracking, and we're still working on loose lead walking 3 years later, but that's a whole nother story and possibly a testament to my consistency in training.
Well, here's what I love about everything you've shared so far, and here's why I'm really excited to share your story with the podcast audience. I love your exploratory process and how you explored. You said you pretty much did. Once again, forgive me, and I appreciate your graciousness with connecting names with stories. You explored all of these different sports with one of your dogs to find the outlet that helped them and fulfilled their needs. And what I love about your journey is you can get a sense, as the listeners of this show and myself sitting here recording this with you, get a sense of the effort you've put in and the huge learning opportunities that you've got from exploring all of these different paths and directions. So I'm curious to know, because once again, there are so many people listening to the show. Every trainer has unique challenges based on the individual animals that they work with on a daily basis, or human learners. And they feel that frustration that you felt early on, and they feel it can be embarrassing to be a trainer and have a dog who does these things that your identity says they should be doing nicely or whatever. And so, but you've, as I said, you've kind of explored all these different paths and you've found these ways to fulfill your dog's needs. What is your problem solving strategy? How do you get through these challenges? Because we're all there as trainers, we're all there. So I'm just so curious to know about how you operate in that way.
I think I'm gonna steal Kim Brophy's analogy of it is finding the lock and the key. It's finding that match for your dog, because the more I'm understanding about the dogs, the more I'm learning is that there is nature and nurture, and there are always going to be genetic needs within the dog from their breed, but there's also going to be needs within that dog as an individual. And Minx and Chica, mother and daughter, it's pretty kind of as close as you can get apart from direct siblings in how you would expect them to be. They could not be more different in terms of how they train, in terms of what they'll kind of offer you. Chica is the foodiest little madam ever, and this is why she ends up in all these situations of climbing up things and stealing things she shouldn't, and generally getting herself into mischief, because she was always the problem solver, but she was the dog that you could kind of set out puzzles for and she would just get them straight away. And I did a lot of shaping with her because she would offer it to you, and she was just always such a confident little dog. The reason Minx actually got her name originally is I think she was 3 weeks old. Their eyes were just starting to open. And I remember I was trying to sort out the whelping area, and I needed to move her. And as I gently picked her up, she growled at me. And I was like, wow, okay. I didn't realize 3 weeks old puppies got grumpy and growled at you and told you to put them down immediately. Also, Chica's one of those that she will come up for cuddles. She will sit on you. You can literally hold her kind of baby style. She'll lay on her back, get tummy rubs. And she's just delicious. She is the princess. Minx, she actually has a queue to be picked up. I ask her if she wants to be picked up. She taught me this very early on, as I've just said. But with her, it became very obvious that I needed to make sure that she felt confident, that she could control things more. With Chica, I can literally just call her, scoop her up, and she's like, yay, cuddles, amazing. With Minx, we have a cue that is basically I reach down and kind of, when kids are trying to get your attention or wave and they sort of open and close their hand quickly, that's kind of the cue I use, which means, do you want to be picked up? If she faces me, she doesn't want to be picked up. If she turns away from me, then I can scoop her up and hold her. So I think with me, with having a process, I don't have a recipe. You know, I can't go, right, well, you do this and this and this and this. I think a lot of it, to be honest, is instinct. And I'm going to say thanks to my dad now, because my dad was a huge, huge animal lover. He was the one that really got me into animals from an early age. You know, it was an ongoing joke that every walk turned into an Attenborough episode, because he'd be telling you what the birds were and what the wildlife was and all that stuff. And I now do it to my husband, and I'm pretty sure it drives him insane. But it's just one of those, I think it's more I go with my gut of what I feel is appropriate. And so far it's steered me right, rather than me going, right, well, I would do X, Y, Z or ABC. I don't have a recipe card. I'm sorry.
Well, I respect that, and I value that. I'm someone who goes with my gut as well. I'm curious, because I actually do have a process about listening to my gut, which kind of I don't know if that sounds contradictory, because I feel like potentially it sounds like a more of a process that you don't use much thinking, but I can see you thinking about that. So
I am like the listeners can hear the cogs in my brain right now.
Well, I learned it through antenatal class, and I know, right? But there's this process, like if you've got to make decisions in the delivery room, use your brain. Brain stands for benefits, risks, alternatives, instinct, and what happens if you do nothing. So that instinct part is where you trust your gut. Where it's like if you ask yourself, what do you feel like? My brain can, like, my gut and all the neurons in there can give me an answer. So that's my process. It's quick, but it's a process. But I know a lot of trainers get into a little bit of paralysis of analysis. You know, they think about all of the things that, and then it can stop them from taking action. I get the sense that is not an ailment for you. So when you say trust your gut, what does that look like?
I mean, I guess. And again, this may come from being with horses, because when you're working with such a large animal, you know, I mean, my mare was a really good example. She was what would be referred to as kind of bomb-proof, like she was very good. And every now and again, she would just do the biggest spook or something completely ridiculous. And half the time, you know, I'll be honest, I wasn't paying attention, because I'd become so complacent with her being good that when she did suddenly like do something dramatic, I was like, whoa, okay. That's when I would say my gut would come in. One of the other ponies I had, honestly, I always joke that I feel that Remy actually prepared me for dealing with Dodge, and I just need to not have male animals at all, because they all just way too dramatic. But Remy was a little pony that I had on loan. He was only 13 too, which I appreciate sounds for people that are horsey. That's not big. For the non-horsey people, it's kind of child-sized pony. But Remy was not a child's pony. I was fortunate that I was a lot lighter back in the day, and I used to ride some of the ponies anyway. But I can remember one day going to catch him in. Well, no, I was in his field doing something. I think I was like checking for poisonous plants or something like that. I was just hanging out in the field. And I don't remember seeing him coming. But for some reason, I ducked. As I ducked down, I saw his foot go past my head, and he'd run past me in the field and kicked out. He would do lovely things like that occasionally, because he was a delight, hence not a child's pony. That to me is instinct. That's your gut. That's kind of knowing what to do. And I think that the more we train practically and the more we get muscle memory, the more we go from kind of having to think about what we're doing to actually just doing it. You know, it's that whole thing of, prime example, be driving a car. The first time you drive a car, you really, really have to think about what you're doing. So otherwise you stall it, or, you know, you might crash into something, or you might brake too hard or something. And now you can drive a car, and it's quite hard to explain what you're doing. And I think that's part of maybe what it is with dogs. And one of the things that I sometimes need to do, and I remember doing it as a riding instructor as well, and I don't think it's always the best way of teaching, but sometimes I need to either sit on the horse or just take the dog for a minute and just try and do the behavior with the dog or the horse myself, so that I can work out what is needed, so that I can then explain it to the person I'm trying to teach. Because because I think because I rely on my gut and I just do things instinctively, it then sometimes makes it really hard to say to the owner, oh, well, the reason the dog's, I don't know, not going through the hoop is because your body weight's different, or the reason they're struggling to go around a barrel is because you're moving your shoulder too quickly. Sometimes I need to kind of go, right, let me do this, let me try, and then I can coach them and I can help them with what they need to do. And I think sometimes not knowing how my process works is a curse, because sometimes that makes it quite hard to teach, because I am competent in what unconscious competence. That is the phrase I was looking for. I've kind of got to that stage, and sometimes I have to get myself to go back to conscious competence so that I can direct and coach the learner I'm working with.
Well, I was thinking about you talking about muscle memory and building that muscle memory. You're building towards conscious competence. I literally wrote that down. So I'm glad that we ended there. I'm going to jump back a little bit. Firstly, your dad sounds amazing. That's totally how I am with Summer. I asked my wife, she'd be like, oh my God, can we go? Stop looking at those insects.
No, keep doing it, because you know what? She will thank you for it in the future. And I wish she was still here to still keep giving me lectures on what the damn bird is at the end of the garden.
She's at daycare saying the Maori names for birds, and because it's kind of like pronouncing a toddler and it's like muddled, the teacher's like, what is she saying? And she just wants to see the birds in books. Nature versus nurture. I mean, she's my child. No, I'm just joking.
No, I love that though. But some of that is a thing.
I'm curious to know, with your early dog that used their voice a lot. We talked about frustration, and you said when you got Dodge home, you learned Dodge like to use his voice as well. Did you? And a decade had passed between those times?
Yeah, so I had Tizer would have been 13. So yeah, I would have had 11, 12 years of living with Tiz. Yeah, 12 years of living with Tiz. And then all of a sudden Dodge came into the world. And I joked that Tizer kind of prepped him before he left the mortal plane, bless him. But Dodge has been a big learning curve for me in, first of all, training a bigger dog again, because all of my dogs have been medium to teeny tiny. You know, Munchkin is 20 kilos, but she's kind of large Springer, small Labrador sized. So she's not big at all. Obviously, Chihuahuas are not big, although I have giant Chihuahuas because they're like 5 kilos, which in Chihuahua is ginormous. And Tizer was obviously a little terrier. So it's different in terms of kind of where I'm holding myself and where I'm placing reinforcement and stuff, because I've been used to breaking my back and stretching my hamstrings for a decade. And all of a sudden I can stand upright and reward the dog straight into its mouth without having to bend over, which is cool. But I think with Tizer kind of being the way he was, and I hate the word reactivity, and it's why I keep saying big emotions, because at the end of the day, everyone reacts. And I just think reactivity is this label that gets thrown around way too much in the training world. So Tizer was not great with dogs he didn't know, especially male dogs. Dodge is following in that trend, which is not ideal at times. But the difference was with Tizer, I could just pick him up and walk away. I don't have that option with a 35 kilo shepherd. But the strategies I learned with Tizer, I remember like doing back training with him. So I was kind of understanding that. And actually, when I first started training on my own, I set up my own company. As much as I was doing the kind of pet class and stuff, a lot of my one-to-ones were kind of dogs with big emotions. And I worked with a fair few dog reactive dogs, you know, dogs that found being around other dogs really difficult. And actually Munch and Chica were both amazing stooge dogs. They were so good. Chica's very good because if she's with you and you have a treat bag on, she's just staring at you and she couldn't care what else is going on in the world because you have the chicken and she needs the chicken, and she will stare at you until you give her the chicken. Also, because of her small stature, she's less imposing for dogs. Munchkin was then the kind of next level up with working with dogs that were maybe dog reactive. And I think the journey with Dodge has kind of developed in that he is dog and people reactive. We believe that he is of security line working shepherds. And honestly, he's very spooky. He is, in ways, he's so confident. And then in other ways, he's so unconfident. It's actually, he's kind of a bit of a conundrum, really, because it's like one day he'll be super confident and then all of a sudden he goes, oh, I need to shout. And then he goes, oh, yeah, no, I don't need to do that anymore. And I think Tizer kind of taught me the basic skills of how to work with a dog like Dodge. Dodge has furthered my skill set, but also taught me the importance of control and management. And for him, there is so much management in place. And, you know, I find one thing that always amazes me with him so much is that, you know, he doesn't go to the local park off lead very often. It's either when I've got hubby with me or it's pouring with rain and no one else is there. But I can take him to a competition where there are 100 other dogs. And yes, there's management and I'm very mindful and we don't go near other dogs that we don't know. And I make sure he has space, but he'll cue with dogs he knows. He'll go into the competition ring and he'll work and he's amazing. And actually the last few months, he's even started working with a friend of mine. So if I'm judging, one of my friends handles him in the competition as well. So this is where when you train a sport like Hoopers that is so predictable for the dog, you know, the dog understands the job, understands what the criteria is. It can actually help with the big emotions. It really helps with their confidence because they understand the game. They understand what they're playing. And the fact that we can now transfer that to another human as well is just massive. It's just, yeah, it gives me the warm fuzzies.
Awesome, and we're going to talk more about this in part 2 of this episode. Let's, with that in mind, head towards the end of this part. Just want to point out some of the things I loved from what you said. I love that conversation about it being both nature versus nurture, and you learning about the importance of control with one of your animals in the pickup queue. I love that you talked about your little orange dog going from being really unsure and thinking about what you've just shared with us, that learning we're all doing from people like Susan Friedman and Dr. Joe Lang about how emotions are tracking contingencies, and you've put them in this place where they've got that control, it's positive reinforcement, and we're seeing these outward things that we might label as, or just a decrease in the reactivity, more calm, more relaxed.
Yes.
So that's really cool, and that's why I can't wait to share more about Hoopers with this audience. But before we wrap up part 1, can you just share with the audience what a day in 2022 October looks like for you, and where they can go online to find you, find out more about the things you do, and get in touch?
Cool. So a day is kind of a thing, but my weeks are kind of fairly like Mondays and Wednesdays are my main teaching days where I go out and teach people and we play hoopies and have a lovely time. Thursdays is normally the day I train Dodge. So it's a little bit of a busman's holiday day. So it's the day I take him training normally. Tuesdays has now become hydro day. So that's his fitness day now in a week. He also has a decompression day. Every single week we have a day where, and I try and do it for me as well, where we can both just and relax. And one of the things with him, if we've been competing, he always has decompression day if we've been a one-day show. But if we've been at like a long show, like over the summer, one of the shows we were at, we had 4 days of competition, then a day of workshops before we came home. He did not leave the house for 48 hours. He just needed that decompression time. So that's something that he has taught me. I was always kind of one of those, well, you know, dogs should have a day off every day of the week. I don't think dogs need to be walked 7 days a week. That's my opinion. But with a dog like him, he really needs those decompression days. In terms of where people can find me, find out more about Hoopers, Canine Hoopers World. We have a website, which is www.caninehoopersworld.com. And then we are on Facebook. We are on Instagram. I'm now on TikTok. I've actually got down with the kids. The TikTok is a lot more about Dodge, although it's under my tagline but it's the fitness stuff we do with him, some of his competing stuff, his training stuff. I'm just trying to get some more of that you can train a German Shepherd positively vibe out on social media. Dodge has his own Instagram, so does Minx, at Dodge Shepherd and at Minx Chihuahua. They're on the Insta. And then we sort of have a YouTube channel, but I'm really rubbish with keeping up with that. So we're on kind of all the socials, and then we offer online training and in-person training. But the online training is open to everybody in the world. From owners, we have awards that they can do online, and we have a Hoopers at Home course and handling courses. And then we have instructor courses that are available online as well.
When you say awards, what does that mean?
So I'm going to use a bad word, and I'm sorry. It's not a really, really bad word, but I'm just going to apologize to anyone. I'm what's known as a ribbon whore. I love a rosette, okay? They're like my favorite thing. And one of the things that I love with Hoopers is that it's super inclusive. And a lot of people don't want to compete. And Minx kind of pushed me to do this. So we have progress awards that our instructors can offer their clients, but we also have achievement awards, which people can do online. They can go to the park, go to a private field, go to their garden, set up the equipment they need, video it, send it in, and then they get sent a very, very beautiful rosette and a certificate in the post to say that their dog has achieved a level of understanding in Hoopers.
Sounds incredibly reinforcing. Hey, gratitude to you, Carrie, for sharing everything so far. We love hearing about people's behavioural odysseys, as we call them here on the show. And we will link to all of the things that you just shared with us in the show notes for this episode. As mentioned, we're going to wrap up this for part 1 now, but Carrie will be joining us again in our subsequent episode, where she's going to share all about Hoopers, what it is, how it came about, and 5 ways, and you might have got some hints or multiple hints at this during this episode, 5 ways Hoopers can help teams, humans and poochers build trust and teamwork. For now though, Carrie, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to come and hang out with us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's like a little tick off the bucket list, I think.
We do, of course, really appreciate all of you tuning in today as well. And if you have enjoyed this episode and you were interested in carrying on the conversation about working with our animals in the most positive, funnest, choice-rich ways, then as mentioned at the start of this episode, the Animal Training Academy community is waiting for you. Head on over to www.animaltrainingacademy.com and click on the membership button in the main menu to learn more about what members are describing as the Netflix social media platform for behaviour geeks. That's it for this episode though. We're going to wrap it up there. Thanks again so much everyone for listening. You'll hear from us again soon.